I'm Elliot, and welcome to Conflict Uncovered, your go-to podcast for in-depth analysis on the complex and dynamic conflicts shaping the Middle East, Israel, and the world. Join us as we delve into the latest developments, historical contexts, and the geopolitical forces at play. We bring you the insights you need to understand the issues that matter most. Stay informed, stay engaged, and uncover the truths behind the headlines. Hi and welcome. It's the evening of December 29th, 2024 here in Israel. And for the past week, we've been seeing a trickle, if you want to put it that way, of Houthi ballistic missiles fired into Israel in the course of the night, 3-4 o'clock in the morning. An Israeli response and the expected UN condemnation of Israel for escalating the situation. So I want to spend a bit of time talking about who are these people? Who are the Houthis? What do they want from Israel? Why are they firing from Yemen at Israel? And why is it so important to them to suffer the damage that they've suffered and still continue to do what they're doing? Well, first and foremost, I think you can often tell a lot about an organization by its slogans, its mottos. The Houthis' slogan has 5 points to it. The first, Allah is great. The second, death to America. The third, death to Israel. The fourth, a curse on the Jews. And last but not least, victory for Islam. Death to America is its own concern. It also seems to be a common refrain here in the Middle East. Death to Israel is equally common, but I think it's very important for us to pay attention to the fact that the Houthis say not only death to Israel, but a curse on the Jews. In other words, for those out there who believe that what the Houthis have been doing has to do with Gaza or the Palestinians or the so-called occupation and the so-called settlements, need to understand that the core of their hatred of Israel is that it is Jewish, and it is not limited to Israel. They call for a curse on the Jews. Now, where does all of this come from? And who are these guys? So the Houthis are Yemeni Shiites. The Houthis are a tribe. Not all of the members of the Houthi organization are from the Houthi tribe, but the Houthi tribe was the initial organizer, and its first two leaders, brothers, one was taken out, the other still around, are known as al-Houthi by their tribal names. Started out as some other organizations have in the past, jihadi organizations, first and foremost as charitable organizations, in this case as a youth organization, that over the years and over the decades radicalized. They came under the influence of Iran and Hezbollah. Hassan Nasrallah, the late and unlamented leader of Hezbollah for many, many years until he was taken out by Israel a few months ago, was a lecturer for that organization. In other words, the Khomeiniist hatred of Jews has worked its way down through and into Yemen. And the Houthis were one of the major factors and ultimately the main player in the civil war, the uprising against the central government in Yemen, which to some extent is still going on, although it's somewhat stabilized. With it all, not only as Shiites, and here we should be very, very careful. Iran does support Shiite organizations, but it also supports Sunni organizations like Hamas and like Islamic Jihad. The Houthis came under the wing of the Khomeiniist Iranian Republic, and they supported them, that is, the Iranians supported the Houthis with weapons, with the ability to attack Saudi Arabia, which sided with and still sides with the central government in Yemen. And was very much involved in maintaining a very high level of fighting and gave the Houthis the ability to carve out a portion of Yemen and create a semi-independent entity there, which they now control and rule. But there's more to this than Yemen, and more to it than the Sunni Shiite divide at the end of the Arabian Peninsula. I noted this years ago and came to fruition in this past year. The critical importance of Yemen geographically as the entry point through the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb into the Red Sea and through the Suez Canal. Now, of course, the world's very much aware of this at the moment. They've been doing it now for over a year, shutting off shipping. Major shipping companies have rerouted their ships. Instead of going through the Suez Canal, they now go around Africa. And in that, the Houthis are essentially expressing Iranian strategy. And what do the Houthis care about who goes through the Red Sea? But an Iranian strategy which involves a global chokehold, if they can do it, on major commercial channels, arteries, and of course the Suez Canal being one of them. The world has essentially ignored this, and this is kind of shocking with all the talk of economic issues in the world and environmental issues in the world. By essentially allowing the Houthis to shut down the Suez Canal, the cost of doing business in the world has gone up significantly. In other words, the average family in the United States, for example, and in Europe, is paying more for shipped goods than they did in the past. Not a peep out of the governments. A very, very weak naval coalition was sent first to try to protect the ships. That didn't work. And here, let's understand, you don't have to sink a lot of ships or damage them for shipping companies to say, you know what, we're not going there. It's just not worth the effort. And it's not worth losing one in whatever to these characters. And the result was, as I said, a tremendous increase in shipping costs, also in the use of fossil fuels to ship things. Haven't heard anything from the environmentalists on that one. And at the same time, very, very minor strikes by this naval coalition against pinpoint targets that essentially left the Houthis and the Iranians laughing at their ability to shut down global commerce through this area and have really no significant response by the world. When the fighting broke out in Gaza after the Hamas massacre of October 7th, the Houthis immediately jumped in, as did Hezbollah, saying, well, we're not going to let it go past. We're going to take part in this grand war against Israel. Of course, what they call the Zionist entity. They don't refer to it as Israel. Now, because of their distance and the fact that most of what they did was a physical irritant and not much more than that, and I don't want to understate the tragedy of those who were killed, a small number killed, injured, physical damage done, the cost of intercepting and the like, and I'll come to what's happened recently in a moment. The main threat that Israel had to face, of course, was Hamas, and immediately after that, Hezbollah, and with Iran operating in the wings, coming through Syria. So the Houthis were kind of left to their own devices, sending their drones and occasional missiles, and Israel intercepting most of them and dealing, because how many enemies can you take on physically all at once? In more recent times, in recent weeks, Israel having essentially taken Hezbollah out of the fight, at least for the time being, with the Syrian collapse and Iran being pushed a little bit further as well into the background, in addition to the consequences of the Israeli airstrikes against Iran. Hamas on the ropes. The job in Gaza is certainly not finished, and we're in the aftermath of the major Israeli military raid on Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza, in which 240 terrorists were arrested. That isn't over, but it is nowhere near the threat that it was in the past. The Houthis, under the circumstances, have actually stepped up their operations by firing ballistic missiles into central Israel, one a night, and of course at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. So there are those, and those in okay, cut this, go back. There are those Israeli thinkers and strategists who say, well, it's really not all that big a deal. Yes, it's an issue, but it's more an irritant than anything else. And we should really be focusing on Iran and not on the Houthis. I would say, first of all, one, although they're connected, has nothing to do with the other. I want to start with the Houthi part of it and leave Iran sort of for the end and for another conversation. First and foremost, every Houthi attack, every attack on Israel is significant as a violation of Israeli sovereignty. If it is allowed to happen and poo-pooed, ignored because it was intercepted or because it did no damage, in and of itself, that is a huge mistake and puts us back on the track that allowed for the building up of Hezbollah and Hamas over the past decade and a half. Every attack against Israeli sovereignty should be treated as a massive attack because what is being threatened are not individuals, but the sovereignty of the state of Israel. Second, these attacks are classic terrorist attacks. In other words, they do relatively little overall damage. Think about a normal, a regular, standard terrorist attack, not October 7th, not 9/11, but the more typical ones, killing a few people perhaps, wounding a few more people perhaps, and again, I don't belittle the tragedies involved, but the impact on the population is psychological. It causes a change in behavior. It induces fear. People don't go out. Their lives are simply changed because of the situation, not because of the immediacy of the threat. In this case, millions of people are awakened in the middle of the night, forced to leave their beds, go to safe rooms and shelters, and wait out the attack, and then try to get back to sleep at 3 or 4 in the morning after something like that has gone on. The impact psychologically, sociologically, and economically on the country is enormous at the cost for the Houthis of the firing of a missile. The Israeli response, which actually started after a drone attack a number of months ago, but much more high impact with the most recent attacks, was not the tit-for-tat Hezbollah method, but rather massive airstrikes against Houthi ports, airports, major cities, causing significant damage. And of course, the world condemned that, but we're not surprised. When Israel responds to an attack, it's considered an escalation and needs to be condemned by the world. Fortunately, we essentially ignore that. But it needs to be understood. These attacks, while they are in the hope of deterring the Houthis, are not deterring them and will not deter them. The Houthis are willing to take enormous punishment to carry out their ideological belief of death to Israel and a curse on the Jews. What Israel is doing, in addition to the hopeful deterrence, is also inflicting significant physical damage, primarily to the Houthis' ability to receive additional aid from Iran. The airport attack, the port attacks, not only hit them where they are in control, but also where the Iranians are sending them the missiles, both ballistic and short-of-sea missiles that were being used against shipping, as well as other weaponry that they use. So there's a physical aspect to these attacks that is not simply punitive, and very important to keep in mind because that's really where the damage is going to count. Last but not least, while the Iranians are certainly the head of the snake, as they're called, or maybe the head of the core of the Hydra, I think it would be easy to overstate the impact of Iranian control here on the Houthis. Unlike Hezbollah, which takes its orders directly from the Quds Force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, unlike Hamas, which was life and death dependent on Iran and Qatar for the previous years prior to October 7th, and in terms of support since October 7th, the Houthis are their own independent operation, and they don't take orders from Iran. Now, a lot of what they do is good for Iran. They're a true proxy, but they are not agents. They are not subsidiaries as Hamas and Hezbollah are. So dealing with the Houthis is its own issue and a complicated one. Dealing with Iran is its own issue and also a complicated one, but the two should not be confused. With that, we'll see what comes up in the days ahead. I suspect we'll be seeing more missiles from Yemen being fired into Israel, and we'll see what the Israeli response is. In the meantime, it's December 29th evening here in Israel. Stay engaged, stay safe. Thank you for listening to Conflict Uncovered. As always, it's been another rough day in the Middle East. We hope you found this episode insightful and engaging. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share and recommend with your friends, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. For more in-depth analysis and exclusive content, join our community and follow us on social media. Stay tuned for our next episode as we continue to explore the critical issues shaping the Middle East and the world. Until next time, stay informed and stay safe.